Welcome back to the Mystery Case Eeks. Today I want to tell you a story from Hong Kong. There's a rumor that in the Lai King housing estate there was an apartment on the third floor, Unit 16. People said it was haunted. They claimed that many times neighbors heard strange sounds coming from inside the apartment. The place would be empty, but they could still hear a door opening, water running, the sound of someone washing their face. And there was something else. Around 3 in the morning, almost every day, people nearby said they heard high heels clicking through the hallway. Anyone who rented that apartment never stayed longer than a month. They said something inside felt wrong. They couldn't sleep. They were always on edge. And one after another, they moved out. Later, the developer of the building decided to abandon the apartment entirely by sealing it off with a wall. 2 red marked squares used to be the door to Unit 16 on the third floor. Afterward, workers built a wall over it as if the apartment had never existed. Just hearing that is enough to make you uneasy. But even after the door was sealed, people nearby still said they heard the same noises. Sometimes from inside there was the sound of a television running water, and even 2 girls talking to each other. That story lasted for a very long time. Even by 2012, people were still talking about strange things connected to that apartment. Of course, they were only rumors. But when too many people tell the same story, it starts to feel colder. So why did people talk about that place like that? Because in that very apartment in 1984, a real tragedy happened. The apartment belonged to the family of Leung Suetsi. That year, she was around 22 years old. She had a younger sister named Leung Suet Ngan, who was 18. Their parents were in their early 50s. Suetsi was a very good student. She graduated from a fairly prestigious institute, and after graduation she was hired to work in a government office. At that time in Hong Kong, a stable government job carried status and respect. Suetsi had a boyfriend named Yip Siu Man. When she graduated, he was serving in the military. From 1981 to 1983, the two were in a relationship, and from the outside, things seemed to be going well. But many people said Yip Siu Man was the type who looked handsome and decent on the surface, yet was deeply dependent in love. He listened to Suetsi almost too much. Bad habits he had before, like smoking and drinking, he gave up completely after he started dating her. People also said he really liked the military and wanted to continue down that path, but Suetsi didn't like the idea. She told him not to stay in the army. So even though it was something he wanted, something he had been aiming for, he gave it up and left the military. After that, he worked as a bar attendant in a hotel. Compared with Suetsi's government job, the gap between them was noticeable. But their relationship continued. Suetsi's family, however, especially her parents, did not want them to end up together. Maybe they felt Yip was not a good match for their daughter, not stable enough, not equal to her in status. So they tried hard to stop the relationship. But despite their objections, the two kept seeing each other. Then in October 1983, something happened. Suetsi's father became seriously ill and passed away. After his death, only her mother and the 2 sisters were left in the home. Yip Siu Man came with a group of his friends to help arrange the funeral. He handled everything carefully from beginning to end, and no one had anything bad to say. Everyone praised him for being so devoted to Suetsi's family. After that, Suetsi's mother seemed to gradually accept the relationship. Maybe Yip had shown so much effort that she softened toward him. After some time, he was trusted enough to move into Sweetsy's family home for a month or two. But while living there, he often had small conflicts with her younger sister, Sweetengane. She was only 18 and still in school. She had to study every day. But Yeep often turned the television volume up very loud, so Sweetengane complained. Yeep had a rough temper. One day, Sweetengane told him to lower the volume so she could study. No one knows what he was angry about at that moment, but he slapped her across the face. The blow was so hard, it broke one of her teeth and left her mouth bleeding. Everyone was frightened. Sweetengane was furious and called the police. Officers came, but because it was treated as a family matter, they mostly tried to calm everyone down and mediate. After that incident, Yeep was angry and moved back to his own home. Still, his relationship with Sweetsy continued as usual. Not long after, they got married. Both families seemed happy enough, and nothing appeared too serious on the surface. They married in December 1983. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary family. Sweetsy moved into her husband's home, and her in-laws treated her well. The two families also seemed to get along. But whether there was something unresolved beneath the surface, there is not much information to say for sure. In May 1984, Yeep Siew Man suddenly called Sweetsy's mother. He told her that Sweetsy was sick and had been rushed to Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Hearing that Sweetsy's mother and younger sister Sweetengane ran straight to the hospital, but once they arrived, they searched and found no record of Sweetsy at all. They asked around the hospital for a long time before finally going back home. Only then did they realize Yeep had tricked them. Sweetsy asked him why he would do something like that. Yeep seemed angry at his wife's family, angry at his mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and apparently had made up the whole thing just to upset them. After that, Sweetsy began to feel that something was wrong with her husband. He had played a cruel joke for no reason, showed no real regret, did not apologize to her mother or sister, and did not seem to understand how frightened they had been. He acted as if it was nothing. Because of that, Sweetsy became furious and moved back to her mother's home instead of staying with Yeep's family. At around 5:30 p.m. on May 8, 1984, 4 days after that cruel prank, Yeep Siew Man went to the Lai King apartment building where Sweetsy's family lived. Neighbors who saw him were surprised. Yeep knelt in front of Sweetsy's door for a long time. Sweetsy wasn't home then. Only her mother and Sweetengane were inside. The two women came out and tried to talk to him, tried to persuade him to leave. But Yeep stayed on his knees and refused to go. Sweetengane, who had a quick temper herself, called the police. Officers came and warned him not to disturb the building or cause trouble, telling him that if there were family issues, they should be handled calmly. Yip left, but only moved away from the building for a while. When Sweetsy came home, he returned and began crying, begging her to forgive him and come back. Neighbors were standing around watching, but he kept pleading in front of everyone. After he begged for a long time, Sweetsy, probably exhausted and angry, said, "Are you leaving or not? If you don't leave, I'll tell the police all the dirty things you've done." Hearing that, you might think Yip would finally go. He didn't. He kept begging. Even after Sweetsy went inside, he stayed on his knees outside the door, pleading non-stop. Finally, Sweetsy's mother had to call Yip's parents and ask them to come take their son home. At around 7:40 p.m., Yip's parents arrived at the apartment. When they saw their son kneeling in front of the door, They lost their temper. They scolded him, saying he was a man acting without dignity, humiliating himself in front of his wife's family while everyone watched. They shouted at him for making the family lose face. Yip shouted back. He said that if they wanted him to go home, he would go, but once he got there, he would kill himself. When Swetsy heard him yelling about suicide from inside the apartment, she called out that even if he died, she would not pity him and would not shed a single tear for him. It was a harsh thing to say. But strangely, only a few minutes later, Yip acted as though he had calmed down and agreed to leave with his parents. Before going, though, he said he wanted to go upstairs near the public bathroom to wash his face and nose because he had been crying so much. While he went up there, Swetsy's mother stood talking with Yip's parents. She told them they should probably take him to see a psychologist because his behavior had been unstable and strange. First, the cruel prank 4 days earlier. Now, this scene in the building. She suggested both families find a good doctor and see whether something was wrong with him. As the parents were talking, Yip came back, but when he returned, he was holding a knife about 8 inches long. He stepped forward, grabbed his mother-in-law by the neck, and pressed the blade against her throat. He shouted for Swetsy to come out, threatening to kill her mother if she didn't. In that moment, his mother-in-law seemed to understand that this was real. It was no longer some emotional outburst. It was danger. She screamed for her daughters to stay inside and not open the door. But Swetsy and Sweatngan were terrified that their mother would be hurt. So in the end, they opened it, and the moment the door opened before anyone could say a word, Yip lunged inside and began stabbing the two sisters again and again. At first, Sweatngan was knocked back and tried to run, but when she saw Yip stabbing her sister, she turned back to save her. As soon as she did, he stabbed her several more times. The two sisters collapsed one over the other, blood spreading across the floor. Their mother, panicked beyond words, rushed toward them and was slashed across the throat. She fell to the ground. Yip's parents stood there in shock, frozen to the side, unable to speak, unable to move, doing nothing. Neighbors heard the commotion and ran up. When they saw the blood, they were horrified and called the police. By the time officers arrived, Yip and his parents had already gone home. Inside the apartment were the bodies of Swetsy and Sweatngan, and their mother still barely alive. Fortunately, the cut to her throat had happened quickly and was not deep enough to kill her. She was rushed to the hospital and survived. A few hours later, police went to Yip Siew Man's home and took him into custody. The interrogation and investigation moved quickly because Yip did not deny what he had done. On October 20th, the trial began. Just as he had during the investigation, Yip admitted his guilt. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment for intentional murder. But Yip's family and defense lawyer did not agree with the verdict. They argued that Swetsy had insulted and provoked him, causing him to lose control, and that this was why the killings happened. They appealed. During the appeal, the court explained that a killing committed in a moment of anger or provocation can be considered differently, but only when the act is unplanned and happens immediately after an argument, insult, or heated exchange. In that kind of situation, the court may consider whether the defendant killed under provocation. But the 8-inch knife Yip used had been brought from home and carried on him beforehand. And second, from the argument to the attack, he had nearly half an hour, including the time when he claimed he went to wash his face. If it had been sudden anger, the violence would have happened immediately. Here enough time had passed for him to calm down. He did not. He still carried out the attack. Because of that, the court ruled that this was a deliberate killing one that involved preparation, one in which he brought a knife and attacked not just one person but three. His mother-in-law only survived by luck. In the end, the court upheld the original verdict and kept Yip Siew Man's life sentence in place. After the case became public, newspapers also criticized Yip's parents. Many people felt they had protected their son too much. After watching him kill people, they went home with him instead of calling the police or trying to stop him at the scene. It was the neighbors who called for help. As for Yip himself, something about him was clearly unstable. His emotions seemed extreme. When he loved, he went too far. If his girlfriend told him to quit drinking and smoking, he quit instantly. That might sound like a good thing, but the extreme way he obeyed was strange. Anyone who has ever smoked knows quitting usually is not that simple. Then there was the military. He liked that path, but when Sweatseed did not want him in the army and told him to leave, he left immediately. It showed that Yip seemed to have no firm sense of himself. He was emotionally unstable and quick-tempered. The clearest example was when his young sister-in-law simply asked him to lower the television volume, and he slapped her so hard, he broke her tooth. She was only 18. She was his wife's younger sister. That kind of violence over something so small tells you his mind was not in a normal place. In real life, if you meet someone whose emotions flip too quickly, someone who can go from happy to furious almost instantly, someone whose face and attitude change in a second, keep your distance. People who cannot control their emotions, who swing from joy to sadness to rage without any real transition, can be dangerous. Yip Siew Man was like that. He could seem normal one moment, then explode the next. One moment he was on his knees crying, begging Sweatseed to forgive him and come back. When he didn't get what he wanted, he grabbed a knife, held his mother-in-law hostage, and killed his wife and sister-in-law. 3 women all weaker than him, and he still attacked them. Nothing about that was normal. That is why, after the tragedy, people began saying the apartment was haunted. The female voices people claimed to hear were believed by some to be the spirits of Sweatsea and Sweat Ngan. But when we talk about this case, it is also worth looking at the other side, not to excuse anything, but to understand how a situation can escalate. Sweatsea had been very harsh with Yip in front of others. When he said he would go home and kill himself, she said that even if he died, she would not feel sorry and would not shed a single tear. Words like that may have struck a painful nerve in him. He was already dangerously dependent on her emotionally, and hearing such a cold rejection may have pushed him further over the edge. Of course, Yip's actions were completely wrong. Nothing excuses what he did. But in cases like this, it helps to understand the factors that raise the tension until everything broke. In life, there are people who love in a way that becomes obsessive. When they are rejected or broken up with, they can turn into someone you never imagined. So if a relationship is over, or if you don't want to accept someone's feelings, it is usually safer to handle it calmly and respectfully. Don't humiliate them. Don't insult them. Don't cut too deeply with words, especially if you already sense that the person is unstable. With a normal person, harsh words may leave sadness or hurt, and then they move on. But with someone obsessive, someone emotionally dependent, a sudden rejection mixed with humiliation can trigger something dangerous. So please, especially for women listening, be careful with this. Protect yourself first. And that is where today's case comes to an end. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you have thoughts about this case, leave a comment below. And if there are other cases you want me to cover, let me know as well. I'll keep researching and bringing you more stories in the next episodes. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you again in the next case.